good job nobody can hear the things I say before we go live, isn't it, about bags of quavers? Hello, UK Crime Book Club, and a warm welcome to Sheila Bugler and David Evans. Thank you both for joining us for our Cold Cases panel. And I'm going to let you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your books. So, Sheila, do you want to start us off, please?
Okay. Hi, Sam. Thank you. And hi, David. So I'm Sheila Bugler. I'm an Irish crime writer. I live in Eastbourne. I have written 7 books so far, 3 of them in the D.I. Ellen Kelly series based in London. 3 of them are in the D. Door series based here in Eastbourne. And I've also written a standalone book called The Lucky 8. I'm on this panel, I think, because quite a few of the books I've written involve a case in the present, but that is in one way or another linked to an historical crime. So that's me in a nutshell. David.
I'm David Evans, and originally from Edinburgh. I went to university in Manchester, where I met the current Mrs. Evans. And after sort of 45...
Do you not get into trouble for calling her that?
Yeah, don't get complacent. No, so I've lived in Yorkshire for a while, and I'm now down in Essex. But my first book that I brought out, I've got 2 series out. The Wakefield series, obviously, set in and around West Yorkshire primarily. And the first one of those was Trophies. And the second one in that series was Torment, which was fortunate enough to be shortlisted for the W Dagger. I've got Talisman and Tainted out there as well, so 4 in that series, 2 in the Tendring series, and I think, as I was explaining before in the intro, Tendring is a district of North Essex, sort of bounded by Colchester, Frinton, Walton, Clacton, that sort of area, Harwich. And the first of those I brought out the other year was Disposal, and I've just brought out a second one in that series called Distressed. And I think looking at it, probably 3 out of the 4 Wakefield series have all got a strong cold case link to them. And oddly enough, the third Tendring series that I'm working on at the moment has a couple of cold cases going back to one going back to the Blitz. So a little bit. I'm fascinated with cold cases. I don't know about yourself, Sheila, but it's something that always sort of draws me in when I see it on television.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because obviously it is a fascinating thing. I find it fascinating. Cold cases. I'm a person who likes resolution. I like the confirming. What's the word I'm looking for? The closure. I like to know that there is, even if it's an awful ending for the family, I like to know that there is an answer. So something in fiction like this is often far more satisfying than, can I say satisfying, about, as opposed to true crime, where sadly people don't always find out. So is that something that draws you both in, that you can have some closure? You might not have in every single book that, that you read or write, but is that something that interests you, the closure of the story?
David, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, well, ladies first. Go on.
I don't know about you, Dave, but I didn't consciously set out to sort of write books with a strong cold case element to them. But I think it's partly closure for me, Sam. But I think what really fascinates me is the effect of the past on the present, and that's the thing that really interests me. And I suppose for me, there is always a historical crime, but And because I write crime fiction, it makes sense for that crime to be unsolved in the present time, or wrongly solved, in the past. But I think the thing that is predominantly my interest is that influence of the past, the near past and the further past, and how that influences the present. That's the thing it really is for me. David, how about you?
Well, I think I mentioned to you when we had a chat earlier in the week that one of the things that actually got me into writing was because I had lived around the north of England, Manchester, West Yorkshire, during the reign, if I can use that phrase, of the Yorkshire Ripper. That was something that I was always sort of fascinated with. And there was one aspect of the case which was unresolved until about 2004, and that was who was the perpetrator of the letters and the tape that sent the inquiry way off on a tangent looking for some guy with a Sunderland accent. And I think originally when I started trying to, I was thinking, I could maybe write something here. I was thinking this character who they'd never found at that time, and this is why the book's set in the year 2000, because if I go much beyond that, they actually found the character through advanced DNA. And I began to wonder who this character was. And I wondered if he was a little bit like me in terms of, as I said to you, I'm not originally from Edinburgh. You probably detected my accent has changed through.
Yes, completely. I noticed that. Yeah.
Married to a Yorkshire lass, so things have come in there. And I think people from Edinburgh, well, people from Glasgow tend not to lose that sort of accent. I began to think, well, when you listen to the tape, it's obvious that it's been read from a script. And I thought, well, if I read something from a script, I could sound as though I've never left Edinburgh. I wondered if that was perhaps this character here. And I started to build up who this character might have been. And as I said to you the other day, that one of the other aspects was that I felt so close to this case because my wife had actually, she's convinced she was flashed at by Peter Sutcliffe before he committed any of the murders. And she used to live in a flat in Roundhay Park, and she worked in Leeds at the time and got off the bus and walked through a quietish road, and this character jumped out in front of her. And I remember her telling me about it, that he flashed at her, and she described him. And I think a few months later, because I was still in Manchester at the university then, she was working in Leeds, so it was alternate weekends. And I remember being over in Leeds with her when they discovered the first victim, Wilma McCann, and that was in Roundhay Park. And then not long after, the second victim was near Roundhay Park as well. And then a third one who survived, I think a lady called Marcella Claxton, and she produced a brilliant description of this attacker that was worked up into a photo fit that they used in the Yorkshire Post. And when Jude saw this, she said, it's the guy. The dark hair, the beard, even the gap. But her description was dismissed by the police because they didn't feel she was a reliable witness.
Really?
Yeah. And as I say, the times went on, and I had visits from the police, I think, as did most males between the ages of 18 and 65 at that time, because they just didn't have a clue. And she was actually shocked by one of the DCs that came round one time, and she said to him, "Are you any nearer catching this killer?" And he actually said to her, we could do with him doing another one to give us more clues.
Oh my goodness!
That was the attitude at the time, and and that's how they just didn't have a clue. So as I say, that was at the back of my mind when I started writing trophies, and it's not about Wayside Jack particularly, although there is one thread of it where my DI, Colin Strong, thinks he's talking to him because the accent, and there's a lot of work on the accents in the book. It could be him. But that's only one thread of the story, and the rest of it is taken up by the scene of a murder they find secreted in a wardrobe, a case which is obviously a trophy case. And when they investigate the items in there, they suddenly realise that there's been a series of unconnected assaults on women over the previous 20 years. So that's, again, was a cold case element to it.
And do you? But you said it's through quite. Your new series, your Essex series.
Yeah.
Are there cold case sort of elements to those as well?
And not particularly in the first one. The reason I sort of decided, well, first of all, I'd lived with these characters in the Wakefield series for so long. I thought, I'm fed up of you a lot now. I just want a break. So I decided that I thought I need something a bit, probably like yourself, Sheila, that you something a bit more local because you've picked up an East Coast.
And I was going to ask you about that because I noticed. I think you're probably like me that location element is probably really important in your novels.
It is because a lot of people can relate to, and it's great when I have reviews and people say, you just come down my street in Wakefield, and I'm just hoping you're not going to do something horrible, But the thing with the disposal, the tendering series, I wanted to have two characters, and the story was more about the character arcs. And I've got he's a sergeant who's pulled into CID, and he's working alongside a horrible DI, or he is at the beginning, if you like. And the interesting thing about that is that the guy is DI John Barton, and in the book I make some comment about, and he's called Dick for obvious reasons. Now, when I give talks to people in the WI of the older generation, they know exactly what I mean because they remember Dick Barton, Special Agent. When you talk to younger people, they think he's called Dick because he is one, because that's basically, you know what I mean? But but I did want to have the character arcs of how they don't get on, and Barton resents Cyril in the beginning, but over time things sort of change a bit. So as well as the crime investigation, but I'm thinking about it. There's not a lot of cold case because that's set in the first one is set in the long hot summer of '76, so it's historical in that respect. And then the second one is '77. This one I'm working on now. I've got something that goes back to about 1947, an unsolved murder, and then an incident that happened during the Blitz that I'm trying to work in. But these are a couple of themes that I'm working in. So again, it's the cold case element that's sort of drawn into me.
But then for you, from what you're saying, the cold case, you tend to go back and write in that period, do you?
Well, oddly enough, when I started writing trophies, it was current. You know?
Oh yeah, gosh, yeah.
And then, as I was trying to seek publishers or agents and all the rest of it, time went on, and during the course of that time, that's when all this activity started on television again, and they did a documentary on Wayside Jack, and there was all this going on, and then suddenly out of the blue, they find because when I was doing the research for this, I knew that one of the reasons why they gave such credence to the letters and the tape was because he kept mentioning, remember Preston 75, and that was an unsolved crime then. And interestingly, that was one that Sutcliffe never admitted to and was never charged with. So that was still unresolved. And there was a documentary on from the SIO in that case saying that, well, the contamination of the DNA at the time now meant that they would never get a match for it. So I thought, well, that's great. That means they'll never find that person. And then my wife bought me Wicked Beyond Belief by I can't remember the guy's name now, but that was about what went wrong with the Ripper inquiry during the course of those sort of 6, 7, 8 years. And at the end of that book, Richard Bilton, and he was going to be doing a TV documentary about the fledgling DNA database. And he asked West Yorkshire Police, could he have access to the envelopes that the letters and the tape came, because he was going to go and get them analysed for DNA now that they were in a better position. And after about 6 months, the answer came back, sorry, we've lost them. And I thought, that's great, that means that they can never find who that is. Okay, they might have lost the envelopes and the actual envelopes themselves, but they still had the fluid that they conducted the initial tests to find out that he was a type B secretor. So they could get the DNA from that, and that's eventually how they nailed this character, John Humble. But as I say, as that went on, I thought, but I had to keep the book set in that period, but I had to sort of draft it slightly. But that's what I ended up doing. So it took a long time to come out. And then, as I say, I thought the tendering one, the one hot summer of '76. Those of us.
I remember that summer. Yeah.
It's a classic. So I thought that ties that in nicely as well.
Wow.
How about the research that you have to do for cold cases? So obviously there's things that are easier to find out if you're writing something completely set in the present day because it's all around you, but things like the language and the detail of, you know, the different cars and the technology available, what challenges does that present? Sheila, let's start with you.
I think it does present a challenge. So most of my books are slightly different to David. Most of my books are set in the present and they refer back, but I don't go back in time. But for my second D book, this one, When the Dead Speak, I don't know if you remember this, Sam, there was an element of that was set back at the time of the crime 60 years ago. And I found that really difficult. So what I did was I went out and I bought diaries of people, published diaries that had been written during that time to get things. Because I think the research in terms of like what places look like. You can look that up online. You can find images, especially in Eastbourne. I could find loads of images of what it looked like then. But what I really struggled with was, how did people speak back then? Because our language, as you have just pointed out, David, our language has changed. No one was calling anyone a dick 60 years ago. But I found, I bought diaries that had been published by people who'd written diaries in that time and got them published, and that was the main piece of research. Because, as I have said before when I've been on panels here with UK Crime Book Club, I'm not very good at research. I don't really like doing it. I find I'm always really impatient to start writing. So I find doing research, it really kind of holds me up. But I knew that the language had to be authentic. So I did research for that, especially because actually those historical elements of that book were written in a diary format. So I wanted to get the language right for that. I didn't want it to sound naff or, made up too much. David, I don't know, it sounds from what you said that you're much better at doing research than I am.
I've probably got a better memory, I don't know. But I mean, for instance, in the Tendering series, my main sort of character is Cyril Claydon, DS Cyril Claydon, and I based a lot of that on my dad, because Cyril was a mechanic during the war with the RAF, as was my dad. And during the course of the books, he never swears. I think the worst thing he says is ruddy or something like that. Whereas contrast that to Dick Barton, where he's a womanizer, he's a drinker. But I suppose that I can remember what it was like back in the 70s. I was at Manchester University, and as a student, you can remember how people spoke and how things were. And there's a lot of stuff online. I mean, I don't know, watch an old series of Minder or something like that, set in a period. And especially for language as well, because especially in this day and age now, some of the stuff that they have in those series, you think, well, they wouldn't get away with that now.
Yes,
And even writing books, I read all the series of Morse last year, and I don't know. I think it was about the second book in there. I mean, Morse was an awful character, I didn't like him. But there was some of the language that he used to some guy who was a Maltese guy working in a club in Soho, and I thought, I'd like to see the current version of that to see if they've actually edited that out, because it wouldn't be. Except when I don't know, there was a series called Love Thy Neighbour, wasn't it? That was out, and that was pretty racist looking back at it. But in those times, it was, it was that was how it was. And I suppose Life on Mars is another one. So
it is hard. I think for me, the other challenge is, because I grew up in Ireland, I think if I was writing, my cultural references, say from when I was young, are very, very different, David, to yours, for example. So if I'm writing something in England that was set, say, 40 years ago, I have no culture. My cultural references don't match up with what it was like here in this country, whereas I could write that in Ireland quite easily, I think.
And I struggle the other way around as well.
What do you, even in England, you mean? Because
so if I was trying to write something in Ireland for
because it's completely different, because we had different TV and everything, and just very different. And we were very repressed in those days as well. We're not anymore.
We've got lots of hellos from different members. Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. Marion Todd remembers 76 as well for being so hot.
Yeah.
So what makes, obviously there's a lot of present day as well, but what makes the cold case aspect of writing interesting to you as an author and as a reader?
I think for me, I do think, like I said already, what makes it interesting for me is, as a writer, is that is drawing the lines from what happened in the past and how that influences present life. And particularly, as you know, Sam, because you've read most of my books, I'm really interested in and my character Dee Doran, she specializes in investigating miscarriages of justice, and I do think that's partly growing up in Ireland, we were very aware of things like the Birmingham Six, and And they really kind of influenced us when we were growing up. So I think that kind of got into my psyche. And I've always been really interested. It's such a horrific thing, isn't it, to think of somebody being wrongly imprisoned for something they didn't do. I'm really fascinated with that. And also, and David, I don't know for you, I find as a writer, I don't deliberately set out to explore certain themes, but yet that's what I do. And I find myself again and again going back, and I can look back at all my books and I can see the two big themes that are there are the damaging effect of a bad childhood on the adult person, and the historic, the long-term impact of things that have happened in the past and the present day. So for me, Sam, as a writer, there's something about I'm endlessly revisiting those themes, I guess, trying to understand, really, it's because it's understanding. For me, it's all about understanding what makes people tick. I think that's it for me. David, I don't know for you if any of that resonates. Or
yeah, I do think that that a lot of what happens in the present does have is affected by what's happened in the past, and I think the thing that's come through is where the family of victims have not had, as you said, Sam, earlier on, closure, and that's important. And so if you've got a child that's been murdered and you don't know who's done it, why they've done it, what happened that day, and how they suffered or whatever, that becomes very difficult. But yeah, as you say, miscarriages of justice. I think I've got one or two of those in the book that's sort of come through that, and the DNA as well that has helped to resolve some of those. But yeah, I know you spoke about the Birmingham Six, but there was that poor unfortunate lad who was accused of he was sent down for the murder of the woman in
in Wimbledon Park. Is that
well, no, I was thinking.
Sorry.
Bakewell.
Yes,
he was a guy who was working in the churchyard and found her, and he basically got stitched up by the police because he wasn't, he wasn't too great. And I think it was only the local editor of the newspaper that persisted and managed to turn it. And the police had suppressed evidence that would have cleared him. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces like that that went on way back, and I just find that fascinating. That is that really the case? Did they really do it, or were the miscarriages of justice part of things?
And I think
sorry,
I didn't mean to talk over you there, but I think there is. I think what both of you have said. I do think that thing about closure as well is part of the fascination for me, and because I know when I wrote my first book, Hunting Shadows, I was a young parent, and Madeleine McCann had just disappeared, and that is absolutely was foremost at my mind, was sort of, what if my kid got taken? And that's what I wrote about in Hunting Shadows. But that thing about closure, you think of that family, and you'd almost want to write a book, wouldn't you, that would give them closure, because in real life, of course, closure doesn't always happen. It's and look, we're lucky, I think, in fiction we're able to find that closure for our characters eventually.
Yeah, have you ever written a book, Sheila, where the perpetrator has never been caught by the end?
No, have you? Actually, I have, yes. In my second Ellen Kelly book, there's a character, I loved writing her, a character called Monica. She's really brilliantly kind of sociopathic and psychopathic. She was a great character to write. But she does walk, I shouldn't say this if anyone's going to read it, but yeah, she walks away at the end. So don't bother reading that one, guys.
Still worth reading. Still worth reading. I nearly asked you to stop talking then, Sheila.
Are you going to pick that up again, Sheila, or no plans to?
The Ellen Kelly series.
No, I mean the fact that this character's walked away.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, as you probably know, David, it is great fun writing really nasty characters. And I really had it in my head. I loved writing her so much. I would really love to revisit her one day, and I might do. She was just such immense fun to write. It was brilliant because you can just, and I do always say this as well. I had a really horrible boss one time who was a sociopath. I'm convinced of it, and I do put a little bit of her into all the nasty characters I write, and she was absolutely in my head when I wrote Monica.
Yes, it's great when you got a character that you really love writing, and also they take you by surprise as well. I mean, I remember in Disposal when I've got the two detectives in a car and they've just interviewed somebody and they're driving back and it's as though I'm in the back seat listening to them, and I didn't have a clue what they're going to say to each other, and it ended up with Barton saying to Cyril, "Okay, stop the car, let's have a pint." And I didn't realise it was going to happen. That was the first time the two of them actually spoke to one another properly. You know, and that was great. And there's two characters that I brought in to torment the second in the Wakefield series. Sammy, who was a street girl that befriended Bob, my journalist, who's Colin Strong's number two best friend. Sorry, and she teamed up with, or she became friendly with Susan, who was another character in the book who actually dropped through the floor of an abandoned farmhouse, and that kicked the whole story off, if you like. But they become close. But I just absolutely loved writing those two, so much so that I'm still thinking about whether I can give them a spin-off series to themselves, because they get involved in every other story since, you know.
Well, I think it is hard to let go of characters we like, isn't it? And I do tend to sneak them into other books if I can, actually.
I did have a question about characters. So when it comes to Dee Doran, Ellen Kelly, sorry, not Erin Kelly, Bob Selter, Colin Strong, are you... why did you choose those characters? And obviously you've answered this to a degree. How much do they take over? How much is you writing and how much is them writing? And with David, what you were just saying, do the characters talk to around you more as you get to know them better?
David, you go.
First, Sheila? Or, yeah, no, they do, and they become part of you, really. And you can. I like to write. I've always been told that you start a chapter or a scene as late as possible and finish it as early as possible, so that you haven't got the waffle build-up that you need. And quite often I'll start with a conversation, and I'll hear these two characters talking, and that kicks me off. And once I get that down, because when I start doing that sort of thing, I'll just write the conversation down first. And then I'll go back and say, okay, so they're in this house, or they're here, they're sitting down, they're in the cafe. And then you can add all the little bits and pieces that let the reader know that they're sitting in a cafe or they're in a room. But it's important to get the conversation down while these characters are telling you what's going on. So that's one of the most satisfying aspects of writing.
Well, my friend Marion Todd, I can see her in the chat here, and Marion is a planner, so she'll be putting her hands over her ears saying, stop talking about things just happening. Sam, my characters, sorry, what was the question? How do they...
Are they all talking to each other? How did they develop?
Yeah, I think most writers would say they develop. They have minds of their own. They go their own way, and I think we can all have the best plan in the world, but our characters will take us off somewhere else. And actually, I think a really important aspect of writing is allowing your character to be authentic, because sometimes what we try to do is we try to squeeze our character's behavior into the plot that we have in our head. And actually, for me, it's really important, and it's always better when I kind of trust in the authenticity of my characters, and I allow them to behave the way they do behave, and the way they lead me, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's part of the magic bit about writing, I think, is that you have to trust in that magic, and you have to kind of trust in letting your characters know what's best in a way. It does feel like a big leap of faith, and it's quite hard to do, but for me, that's when it works best. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know about you, Sheila, but I can't get to grips with a new character unless once they've got a name, then I can start putting flesh on the bones. But I need to have a name for the character, and it needs to be right. You can flesh it a little bit, but I do need a name to actually focus on. Okay, I'm off and running now.
I do need a name. Now, the name does sometimes change, but that's mainly because I don't think I'm very good with names. And my editor will sometimes point out that every character in the book has a first name beginning with B or something like that, you know. But yeah, no, I need a name. And for me, I I need the character's voice, and it's not their voice that you hear them speaking, but it's their way of speaking. It's and that's the way into a character for me. So the book I'm writing at the moment. There's another journalist actually, but she's not the main character, called Nuala Fox, and I couldn't get Nuala right until suddenly her personality was there through her voice, through the way she spoke to other characters, through the way she thought. And I love when that happens. I love when you feel the character, you really feel them. And she's very feisty and she swears a bit. And that I can feel her now, you know, but I need to be able to feel them like that, my characters.
When you're speaking about voice, how difficult is it to keep the right voice for the character you're currently writing in your head, whether they are present day, whether they're in the past? You know, however the story unfolds, it might be a memory from the past that we're seeing, as we have done in the Dee Doran books. How do you keep that straight in your head? Is that difficult, or do they just start talking to you?
Yeah, no, I don't find it difficult, and I don't say that with any arrogance. I just don't. They're just there, and and you know what? I think I've heard Marion Keyes speak about this actually, and it gives me some comfort, because I know a lot of writers have really big spreadsheets with all the information about their characters, and I don't tend to do that. They're just there, and it's like knowing a friend, you know.
Yeah, I do actually produce a little file, not a file, but a little paragraph for each of my characters, just to make sure, especially when you're writing a series, because sometimes
I think it's important, yeah, with a series.
So yeah, I do sort of put a little thing together with age, when they were born, that sort of thing, and the other thing, that you've got to get a name right for the age of the person as well. You know,
yes, you do.
It's no good going, "Oh, this guy's crazy," or something like that. You know, you've got to get the and that's where, as I say, I think getting the right name, then I'm off and running.
So how do you get your name? So I'll tell you how I get my names first. So basically what I do is I either scan the bookshelves beside me and I pick out a name that feels right, a first name and a surname, or else I go onto Twitter and I look at all my followers and I randomly choose a first name and a surname. Not randomly, it has to be right, but that's how, because I think choosing names is really difficult. I don't know about you, David.
Yeah. Well, if you go on to what I've got for the Yorkshire series, I've downloaded things like Yorkshire surnames in.
Yeah, I do that as well. Yeah, for Sussex surnames and things like that.
The other brilliant source is a graveyard.
Yes, yeah.
That's where Coronation Street characters all came from. The guy.
That's right. Yeah.
And they say Jim Taggart came from a graveyard in Glasgow as well. That's where that name came from.
Didn't know any of that.
Yeah, because no, I do walk around graveyards and look at names. And the other thing in Eastbourne, on our seafront, we've got those benches that people, in memory of people. And every time I'm walking along the seafront, which is a lot, I'm looking at the benches and kind of like clocking the names and thinking, oh yeah, you know. So yeah, just for lots of sources. Because the other thing for me is I've been living in this country for a very long time, but I still find it hard. The names that come naturally to me are Irish names. When I try to think of a surname, it's always an Irish surname. So I have to kind of constantly re-educate myself for my English characters to come up with English names and English surnames. Otherwise, they'd all be O'Reillys and Kellys, you know.
It's funny that if I was to start a story right now, I think something like Stuart Brown or John Brown would be the first thing in my head. So
the first thing in lots of people's heads, yeah. And for me, it would be, Sean Martin or something like that, the classic kind of Irish name.
I'm going to go to some of these comments. Sorry, everyone, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just enjoying myself. So Julianne Corrigan says hi, Sheila and David as well.
It's my good mate, Julianne, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Marion wants to know if, Sheila, you would set a book in Ireland. And actually, I'm just going to throw it to both of you. Is there anywhere from growing up or moving around or holidays, anywhere else that you'd set a book that you haven't done yet?
So I think I've said before that I really want to set a book in Ireland. And actually, I'd be interested to hear how David answers this, because I haven't been able to do it so far. I've tried several times. And I haven't been able to do it, and I keep trying, but I have now committed by contract with my publisher to write a book set in Ireland. So that is going to happen it's not going to be, I've got a book coming out this September, another book coming out next year. It'll be the one after that is going to be set in Ireland. And I think it's something to do with, David, we spoke a little bit about location and how important it is. I suspect for me to write that book in Ireland, I'll have to go back and spend some time there for it to feel it, you know, because I've been out of the country for so many years.
And that's set in present time then, is it, Sheila?
Yes, it is set in present time. And I think that's the problem. If I wrote a book in Ireland set in the 80s, I'd be flying. I could do that, you know, right away. But because the Ireland of today, I'm not familiar with in that way that I need to feel familiar with it to be able to write a book there.
Yes, right. I mean, there's been obviously so many changes just from us outside looking into Ireland. It's obviously been so many changes. But I do remember a good friend of mine saying that a location is a character in a book, and it's absolutely true. You know, and even when you do sort of fictional places like Peter Robinson, that's obviously Richmond in North Yorkshire, although he doesn't call it. So you get a feel for the place.
I don't like writing. I did have a vaguely fictional place in my last book, but only I didn't like doing it, and I don't like doing it. I much prefer to write real places. And one of the things I love about writing about Eastbourne is it's such a beautiful place, and it's such a lovely place to write about.
Marion Todd says, yay to the Irish
Yay.
book. I was waiting for that. I did think that you'd comment, Marion. Marion Todd says the Christopher Jeffries case was dreadful. A completely innocent man whose reputation is probably still tarnished. It just...
Because I think he was the longest serving miscarriage of justice, wasn't it?
That's right. It's so sad.
And there was the other guy up in Yorkshire who was accused of assaulting or killing the little girl, schoolgirl, and again he wasn't the brightest button in the circuit. And he released from prison after his mother died? So or was it just the other way around? I can't remember, because his mother campaigned for him to get out. But there's a lot of that, and I noticed Julianne mentioned Ricky Neve, because that's only just been resolved now after 20 odd years now, because I can remember him being found on the news.
But it is something, see, all of us, we are haunted by cold cases, aren't we? And by miscarriages of justice. It's something that does capture our imagination.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people like writing about it, and also why people like reading about it, and why there are so many good TV series about cold cases.
Yeah, Unforgotten, New Tricks, all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the fictionalized stories, where they are completely fictional and not loosely based on something that's happened, I can't see how they can't bring comfort to some people as well, because it can almost be like rewriting a horrible ending with no control over it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to, I've never, I just can't imagine what it would be like to live with that long-term sense of injustice, really. Or I think like Laura Hamilton here talks about when the murder is known but the victim's body is yet to be found. I mean, you're right, Laura, that's just terrible. And there's no, like going back to what we said about closure, Sam, there's no closure there ever, you know?
Yeah.
But the only good thing is that you don't necessarily have to have a body to charge somebody with murder, which was always a bit of a problem in the past.
I did have, I think I've spoken to Sam about this before. A few years ago, a cousin of mine disappeared, and it was terrible. Oh my God, it was terrible. But actually what was terrible was he was found eventually, his body was found, he died. He died by drowning. But there's kind of 6 weeks when we didn't know where he was. And that terrible not knowing, I mean, it's a living death, you know? It was, I mean, it obviously was terrible that he was found dead, but you know, at least we knew what had happened to him, and we were able to bury him and say goodbye and mourn him.
Yeah. Before we move on from this, Keith and Winnie, and I can't think of Keith's name, and that's going to drive me mad. But that always haunts me. So we say again. Keith Bennett. Thank you. That when he passed before they found him, I don't think I'll ever not be troubled by that.
And there's still some that are missing anyway because I can't find them.
Yeah. Chris Curran, hello Chris, who also writes as Abby Frost alongside writing as Chris Curran and being fabulous all round. Interesting discussion about naming characters. Is that becoming harder as you try to get more diversity into your books to match the reality of the modern world? Now, there's a question I have never asked before.
That's a great question. It's a great question.
It is.
David, go on.
Well, I say it's easy for me because I'm set in the year Wakefield at the moment is between the year 2000 2002, so the attitudes were what they were then, and the other series is set in the late 70s, so I can get away with almost anything in that within reason. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I think some of these things go a bit too far, really, because I've seen the latest version of what's this thing set in the 50s that in Kent. They just had a new series of it.
Don't know.
God,
I might have heard of it when you think of it, but I don't watch anything. All I do is read.
Darling Buds of May. Was it Darling Buds of May?
Oh, right, okay.
And the character who was sent in as a taxman in the latest series is some guy of West Indian origin, and the guy who looks after the pub is an Indian guy. And you think, well, no, back in the 50s, that wouldn't have been the case. I know diversity comes into it, but it's got to come into it realistically. You know, because that just wouldn't happen in the 50s. And you've got to bear in mind that, yeah, okay, if it's current series now, yeah, great, but it's not. It's still set in the 50s. So
I think there's always going to be some argument for a case for both sides, isn't there?
I think, well, for me, my books are set in modern times, so it's not. But actually, Chris, I think the kind of short answer to that is yes, and also, kind of slightly different. I think it is different, David, because I do write in the present time, and actually, I have become really aware the last few years of making sure my books are properly diverse to reflect authentically, you know, David, the society I live in, and actually, what does happen in my little bubble of an Irish person living in England, I'm great at like making sure there's Irish characters in there, but I have to make an effort and think and make sure that I do have sort of that my books do include more diversity than say the earlier ones did. I definitely do think that.
Donna Morfitt says one of her favourite tips for naming characters is to look at a map. There's some really crazy place names that make awesome character names. I nearly bought somebody a map, you know, with all the really fun names from things that I'm not going to say, but you know, on camera. But you can imagine a little bit more interesting than Crinkly Bottom, for example. You know, there's a lot of great place names, but it never would have occurred to me to look at a map to pick.
I love that tip.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Cyril Claydon came from a place named just up in Suffolk, Claydon. So I did pick that, if you like, from almost as a place name, local to here.
I like that. Hi, Chris. She's saying hi to me. Hello.
Oh, very sweet.
So Marion names characters by going to Facebook, going through her friends, following friends of friends, and find someone of the right age and look. Now that is important. I usually take different first and surnames, so I'm not copying the name of someone I know. So we had Chris MacDonald on earlier on, and when he was writing the series set in Ireland, it was because he missed home and couldn't go during lockdown. And I actually said to him, "Oh, was Brownlee's Bakery one of the was that me? Because most people don't spell my surname the way I do." And he was like, "Probably. I was scrolling through Twitter and I just picked something. Didn't have a clue, didn't remember." So have you used anyone from real life for inspiration for well, obviously, Sheila, you've already talked about this a little bit, but anybody from real life to inspire a name or a character or a trait in somebody?
Well, I did put a fellow writer on in one of my books, Bernie Stedman, and if you're out there, Bernie, hello, thanks for that. We sort of, I think I threw it out as a bid when I was doing that, and so that was quite interesting, really. So I created a nice little character for her. So I think she quite liked that.
And I think I did. I'm sure in the Lucky Eight, I had a character reading a book by Chris Kern, actually. But Chris, you might have got edited out. I can't remember. But I'll get you back in again. Don't worry.
So, what other things do you find helpful as you're writing? Because obviously, you're not brand new. You're not debuts now. So, what have you learned as you've written each book that has it made it easier to move along?
Okay, I'm just going to say, I don't know about you, David. I find writing gets harder and harder and harder. You think it would get easier, but for me, every single book is harder than the last one. Yeah, and I just find it. I started writing. I wrote my first few books. I mean, it's hard work. It's really hard work. The hardest thing I've ever done. But I don't remember feeling the pain that I feel when I write now. And I think it's just because I know more. I know what doesn't work. I know how hard it is to get it work. I do think my books have more complex plots than they did at the beginning. But it does not get easier, Sam. No, not for me. I find it really difficult.
No,
No, not what I want to hear.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't really appreciate that haven't written a book is that it's probably, I don't know, 10, 20 times thinking time than it is actually sitting down and writing. But I tend to follow almost like a screenwriter's way of doing things where, I mean, a screenwriter will sit down with an idea and think, okay, let's put that in a sentence. And then over the course of time, he'll build it up into a paragraph and then a page and 2 pages. Not quite like that, but I tend to, if I've got a couple, I'll always like a couple of threads in my book, at least 2. And if I can get them going and I get up to about the 10,000 word mark, then I'll stop and I'll think about how the synopsis might pan out. And I'll sit down and I'll try and plan out where it's going to go. I've generally got an idea where it's going to end up. And then I'll carry on again. But I won't have that, if you like, synopsis constraining how the book's going to go, because I'll stop at maybe 20,000, and some characters might have taken me off on a tangent, or something else might have come in, and I can just tweak that synopsis at that point and then carry on again. So it means that by the time you get to the end of the book, you've almost got the synopsis, one last tweak, and it's done. Which I mean, I don't know about you, Sheila, but the synopsis was harder to write than the book when we first trying to pitch things out.
Yeah, so a few things on that. First of all, I think we all write slightly differently, and I think I was just reflecting as you were talking, David. I think for me, one of the reasons I find it harder is that partly due to Marion's influence, I am more conscious of plotting as I'm writing. I think at the beginning, for me, when I started writing, I was always so scared that I might stop, like that I wouldn't be able to keep it going. I really focused really heavily for a long time on word count, sitting down, getting my daily word count. I think I'm more confident as a writer now. So what I do a lot is I'm very like you, actually, David. I'll get up to 10,000 words or a bit more, but I stop along the way a lot, and I'll stop and I'll plot and I'll think. On the synopsis, what I would say, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, Sam, I'm sorry. On the synopsis,
no, I love it.
All writers find writing their synopsis really difficult. This is for anyone who's watching. When you've written your novel, you have to submit it to agents and publishers, and part of the submission pack is a synopsis, which is a 1-page summary of your beautiful book. And we all think, oh my God, how can I condense my book into 1 page? And I had a mentor for a year, David, the crime writer Martin Waits, and he gave me great tips on writing a synopsis, and he basically said,
was that in his male character, or was it on his
in his male character? It was before he wrote as Tana Carver, actually.
Yeah.
But he's lovely. He's so lovely. But his advice was sit down with a glass of wine and just try to bang it out in 20 minutes. And actually, I do think I'm quite good now at writing synopses. And I for a long time, I actually had a column in a writing magazine helping other writers to write their synopsis, because writers are kind of we're terrified of it. We're terrified of writing a synopsis, and I think there are ways around that terror. And presumably, David, you've got a lot better, I imagine, as well, have you, at writing your synopsis?
I'd hope so.
But also, you see, once you have a publisher and stuff, it's not so important, is it? It's the beginning when you're submitting your first novel, and that synopsis is everything.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned endings and how, you know, it tweaks throughout writing your synopsis and writing the book. Do you both go in knowing the ending to your book?
No. And this is the God honest truth. When I was writing The Lucky Eight, it had to be submitted to my publisher early in January. So I was really, really writing it all over the Christmas break. And I remember messaging Marion and saying, got 2 weeks to go. I still don't know who the killer is. And she, of course, was a horror to Marion with her perfect plotting. But no, I don't. No. I could say it again. No. David.
Very firm, no.
I tend to have a reasonable idea, but that's not to say that it's going to end up how I thought at the beginning. Because if, as I say, if my characters take me off somewhere to a tangent, or if there's another idea that comes in, I think, oh yeah, that would really fit and it works, then you just go with the flow.
So I'm thinking now that your approach to writing sounds quite similar to mine. You don't like plot in detail in advance, do you? Or do you?
Not in advance, no. But as I say, I like to get to make sure that the two strands have got legs, as I call them. And generally, if I get to 10,000 words and I read back through and I think, yeah, that's working, then I know I've got something to take forward. And at that point, that's when I start thinking about, okay, so where are we actually going? I've got an idea where we're going when I start, but that might not be as it turns out at the end of the day. But it just gives me a little framework to try and work to.
Yeah, that's what I have to do. Yeah.
And take it on from there. But it doesn't constrain the creativity of it. You just go with the flow and then tweak it as you go. As probably you just described you doing as well.
Yeah, I really do. It's frustrating, but I need to write my way into the story. It's just the only way I can do it. I've tried, I really have tried lots of other ways, but I need to, and often I'll have to write 30,000 words before I've found my way, or sometimes 60,000 words. I'll write 30,000 words and I'll think this isn't working. I'll start again at the beginning. 30,000 words later, I'm kind of getting there and feeling my way. And it's a really ineffective way of doing it, I think, but it's the only way that works for me. So
that's it. If it works for you, that's it.
Yeah. I will not be forgiven if I don't ask you both if you are attending any other events. So obviously Harrogate's coming up, but people are doing local book signings or just even attending events, not as an author, just, as another reader. Anywhere people can meet you in the future?
I'm going to go first because the answer is easy for me. No, not at the moment. I'm for personal reasons, I've stepped back from all the events this year until September when my new book is out, and then I'll be starting again, doing as much as I can from September. But I'm not going to Harrogate or Crime Fest or anywhere else this year, really sadly, but I'll be doing it all next year.
It's all right, we'll get you online. We'll keep you coming back to the book club. David?
Yeah, I might visit Harrogate. It just depends how things pan out. We've just moved house back in January, and I think I said to you the other day I was up to my eyeballs in fitting kitchens and stuff, and I've got the bathroom to go and stuff. So it just depends how I can get away from it. So, but yeah, Harrogate, I'd like to.
Harrogate's fantastic, yeah. Can I just jump in here quickly? There's a question, a very important question that's just come up. I don't know who it's from, saying, what's the most you've written before you've thought it's not quite right and given up on it to move on in another direction?
That's David Jones. I just had a look on my phone.
David?
David Monaghan Jones.
Hello, David, my friend.
Yes.
Well, David, in my case, the only reason I think that's a really important question is I've written books that have never gone anywhere. So like 100,000 words, it would be my answer to that. Or often maybe up to 30, 40, 50 words, and I'll just think it's not working. David, how about you?
I don't think I've got anything in the drawer that.
I do.
That I've wasted a lot of time on. Like I say, I've got a couple of things in the pipeline at the moment, but and I've sort of made a little start on, but I can't think of anything much that I've put to one side and think that's not really working. But some people might think that some of the stuff I've got out there doesn't work. But who knows?
I would say on that even it's never wasted though, because there's characters from those books that have come into other books, so there's plots that have come into other books. So it's all good stuff, one way or another.
Yeah.
We're coming up to the end. We've got 4 minutes left.
Wow, that's passed.
That hour has flown. I've just been sat here sipping my not coffee and
Before
listening
I go,
away.
can I just ask you, Sheila, how did you first get into writing? What prompted you to start? I mean, I've said about how trophies give me a start. How
Well,
did you?
I think for me, I'll try to answer this quickly. I always wanted to write.
No, it's fine.
Grew up always wanting to write, and I think really, David, until I had my second child, I didn't have the confidence to do it. And literally, soon after my second child was born, I was on maternity leave. And I had just this absolute light bulb moment. I just thought, do you know what? If I don't start writing, I will be lying on my deathbed thinking I regret not giving that a go. And at the time I was on maternity leave, I thought I'm going to knock out a bestseller in a year. I'm never going to go back to the day job. And I still have the day job, by the way, all this time later. My daughter's going to be 16 in May. So that was 16 years ago. Can I ask David quickly the same question, Sam, before we end?
Of course you can.
How about you? Oh, no, well, you've kind of said, haven't you? But there's still, did you always want to write?
Well, I've always had an interest in it, but I went a long time without sort of reading even, and I picked it up when I was working abroad, and I thought, yeah, I got into it. And then at first I wanted to write for TV or film and stuff, but that was just so difficult. And I thought it must be easier writing a book. Little did I know.
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not easy. There's grey bits. There's grey bits coming.
Tell me about it.
Thank you both so much. Give us a recap of what your books are, where we can find them, what formats they're in, anything you want to say at all. And you don't have to talk fast. It's okay if we go over. I'll forgive you both.
Okay, I'll go then. So, right, I've written 7 books. This is the first book in my Ellen Kelly series called Hunting Shadows. That's a London-based series. Then this is the first book in my Eastbourne-based series featuring Dee Doran. It's called I Could Be You. I've also written a standalone novel called The Lucky Eight, which is about people who survived a plane crash. All my books are available in paperback, ebook, and audio format from all good bookshops, online and in bookshops as well. And that's me.
Okay, as I say, I've got 4 in the Wakefield series, starting off with Trophies, Torment, Talisman, and Tainted. You can see the pattern there. And then in the Tendering series, Disposal and Distressed. And again, you can see the pattern developing there. And they're available in ebook and paperback off through Amazon.
Have to wonder if you've made a rod for your own back with the T's and the D's, David.
Yes.
Well, Dishonour is the third one that I'm thinking of. And it was going to be Discontent. Then I worked out that the Winter of Discontent was actually 1979, not 78. So,
oh, yeah, no, you can't do that.
No, so that's going to be the 4th in the series.
I love the forward thinking. Thank you to all the members and everyone and the admins who've taken part. Thank you both for joining me. I've been so excited. In case you can't tell, I just sit and beam throughout.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.